On Target Radio, Chicagoland's only radio show dedicated to educating, entertaining, and discussion of firearms, legislation, and your Second Amendment rights. Presented in part by the Illinois State Rifle Association, Illinois Gun Works, Pelcher's Shooting Supply, and Safer USA. Now here's your host, firearm instructor, educator, and enthusiastic Second Amendment proponent, David Lombardo.
Welcome to On Target Radio, America's voice for the Second Amendment. I'm David Lombardo, your host, and my co-host, Tim Dalan, across the council from me. Say hi, Tim.
Hi. Tim,
there we go. Thank you very much. Every Sunday, Tim and I are here from 9 to 10 p.m. talking about all things Second Amendment, and that is your opportunity to call in and talk to our guests. Tonight's topic is going to be youth and gun violence. It should be very interesting. We'll take your questions or comments at 312-642-5600, 312-642-5600, or go to Facebook, like our page On Target Radio, and ask a question there. But first, it's David's Rant of the Week.
And I'm sure it'll be a great one.
It will be grating. Yes. This is the Chicago mayor writes anti-gun ballet for banks. That's a catchy title, don't you think?
Yeah, it is.
I think it is. Yeah. Like a petulant child, Chicago's Mayor Rahm Emanuel is lashing back over being unable to get his way in his quest to ban all firearms in the universe. He has taken umbrage at the judicial system, which, at least for the moment, has developed the nasty propensity for thinking citizens have the right to be armed. Worse, they believe citizens actually have the right to defend themselves against a tyrannical government as well as thugs, and not just, sociopathic deer. Obviously, no self-respecting liberal believes anyone should be allowed to possess a firearm for self-protection. Well, any gun-toting, right-wing, strict constitutionalists, that is. Because, of course, liberals can own guns to protect themselves and their children as long as they don't tell anyone they're doing it because. Absent success in disarming John Q., Emanuel is taking a new tack. He's teaming up with the Bank of America and TD Bank to pressure Smith & Wesson and Sturm Ruger into accepting gun measures being offered by the Obama administration. Talk about flashbacks. Smith & Wesson executives must have cringed with the memory of having caved in to similar demands made by Bill Clinton. The result of that episode backfired with gun owners boycotting Smith & Wesson and almost putting them out of business. Emanuel, who, as hard as this may be to believe, once had a budding career in ballet, I kid you not, Emanuel envisions the Chicago bank relationship as a pas de deux, as an intricate movement with two sides in close harmony. Well, close harmony may not be the best choice of words. It's really more like extortion. Emanuel has enlisted a gaggle of liberal mayors to join ranks and threaten the banks to withdraw all their government money. It is a move that could potentially cause the financial ruin of the bank. Now, there's a heartwarming story of how big government works hand in hand with the private sector. Do what we want or we'll crush you. Sounds more like opera than ballet, which does lead one to wonder if Chicago's Godfather can sing as well as pirouette. In the relatively short time he has held the position of number 55, Emanuel has, in the best tradition of Chicago politicians, managed to lateral arabesque from mayor to thug. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who obviously has no appreciation for ballet, sent a letter to both banks and the Godfather. In an apparent attempt to find some common ground with the Godfather, Cruz assumed the ballerina's third position with arm, not to mention middle finger, extended toward Emanuel. He then issued an official invitation to the banks to move to Texas, where they will be appreciated, and further admonished the Godfather to keep efforts to diminish the Bill of Rights north of the Red River. I would echo that sentiment, but alter it slightly. I suggest he keep it north of the Chicago River. And that, Tim, is my rant for the week.
You know, this was a great one. I actually read this one, and I was all happy with it. This was one of your better ones, I think.
You actually read it.
I did.
I'm shocked. I didn't think you ever read the newsletter.
So there's at least one that read it.
And your parents, don't they? Are they listening tonight?
They may be listening, but I don't know that they read your newsletter.
Well, but there's two listeners. Anyway, this evening, we have an interesting show this evening. I think a very interesting show. We are going to be talking about youth and gun violence. And we have this evening the Reverend Dr. Eric Wallace, who is running for the old Jesse Jackson seat, the 2nd congressional seat, which runs from part of Chicago all the way down into Will County. Thank you for being on this evening, Eric.
Pleasure to be here.
And we have Don Moran, president of the Illinois State Rifle Association, who is wheezing and snorting over there in the corner. Glad to have you here, despite your illness.
Thanks, David. I'll try not to breathe on you.
And thank you. The yellow button is the cough button.
No, it's green, actually.
I'm sorry, it's green. And if the stars line up, Chicago Tribune columnist Eric Zorn will be on this evening. And Eric did tell us in advance that he might have a conflict, and we won't really know for probably another 10 minutes or so. If he doesn't make it on tonight, he will be on next week. But I'm very looking forward to having Eric Zorn come on. So that's our lineup, and we'll see how it unfolds as we go. But youth and gun violence. Let's start with a simple question. What elements are contributing to gun violence? What's the tie with the youth gun violence in Chicago?
Wow, you want me to go first?
Everybody looks at each other when they ask that question.
Well, unfortunately, we have to address this issue. I think, especially for what happened with Hadiah Pendleton, I think that was more gang related. And I think a lot of the shootings in Chicago have been gang related. And we need to find a way to handle that. And my opinion is that there's been a lot of out of wedlock births, a lot of single parenting going on. And young people, especially young black males, need a strong father figure in their life to discipline them when they're, going in the wrong direction. I know I had 2 kids, and when they were growing up and they were starting to do something they weren't supposed to be able to do, doing something they weren't supposed to be doing, I stood up and got in their face and said, hey, we don't do that.
Sure.
You're my kids. We don't do that kind of thing. And that's what's happening out here. We be young people who don't have fathers, who are getting involved in gangs, looking for love, looking for acceptance, looking for protection from other gangs. And, sometimes they have to go out and they will, not necessarily thinking that they're a rival gang, but sometimes they're told you need to go show that you're going to be loyal to this gang and go out and shoot somebody, an innocent bystander, and that's how they prove themselves.
It's become a rite of passage.
Yes, thank you. That's what I was looking for, rite of passage, yes.
I don't know how you begin to turn that around. I mean, clearly banning guns it's not going to change it. It's an ethic. It's an ethos. I mean, I don't know how you turn that around.
Well, you start trying to have policies that aren't going to destroy the family, first of all, and try to promote families. And at the same time, then you have to do your police action. I mean, because some of these kids are out there and they just need to be, arrested and put in jail for at least a period of time. And while they're in jail, maybe you have some people come in and be able to talk to them and get them to turn their life around. But you have to do something. And then you have to be able to arm yourself. I mean, this goes back to the right, to defend yourself and protect yourself.
Sure.
I think these 3 things need to be happening at the same time. You've got to have the police action. You have to be able to do something about families and family structure. And then you need to be able to protect yourself.
You're listening to On Target Radio, AM 560, The Answer, and we're talking about youth and gun violence. This subject is interesting to me because when I was dean at a local university for a couple of years, during the academic year, I would go into Chicago at least once, sometimes twice a week during academic year. And I would go to inner city schools. And this was a private university. They had endowments. They had money, right? And I would go into the inner city schools, and I would talk to students. And I would say, look, all you have to do is graduate from high school. I got money for you to go to college. I got almost no interest at all. I don't know how you deal with that.
It just seems like there's so many things that are not lined up. As you alluded to, it seems like the punishments don't always fit the crime. It seems like there's so much plea bargaining that goes on that people do something wrong and they aren't held accountable. So other young people see that and don't think they're going to get in trouble for things.
Tim, I think that in some degree we've made minor things too serious crimes and made too serious crimes too little. And so we're stigmatizing these kids that do something that they should just get some kind of slap on the hand or counseling from when they're little. Instead, they're getting charged with something that's more serious, and that ruins their opportunities for the future. It's on the other hand, we have people that do very serious things, and we don't punish them long enough or hard enough. We don't keep them in jail for a long enough time. If we go back and we look at the murder analysis from 2011, it was something like 79% of the people who were involved in murders in the city of Chicago that were murdered. 79% of them had a criminal history, and 75% of the people who were arrested for perpetrating those crimes also had a criminal history. So, those particular people that have been involved in serious crimes and stuff, they have to be removed from society. As hard as that is a pill to swallow, it's something that has to be done in order to protect the rest of the civilization.
And you have really 5 seconds, but tell the listeners how many people were killed in Chicago last year with a rifle. One. But yet we're going to ban assault weapons. I mean, there's the typical liberal logic. It's a cosmetic thing. And we're going to talk more about that when we come back. We're talking with the Reverend Dr. Eric Wallace. We're talking with Don Moran, President of the Illinois State Rifle Association. And we'll be back with more On Target Radio after these messages.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Hi, I'm David Lombardo, host of On Target Radio. You're living proof that radio advertising reaches listeners. In the 2 years I've been advertising on AM 560 WIND, Safer USA grew from 300 students a year to over 1,200. By coupling our On Target Radio broadcast with our Facebook page, we found our audience is steadily growing, and in only 2 months it appears we've exceeded 5,000 listeners. Over 34% are in the age group 25 to 34, 26% are 35 to 44. We have listeners from Rockford to Western Michigan and Southern Wisconsin to St. Louis. Thanks to live streaming on the internet, we also have listeners as far away as Germany, Japan, and New Zealand. On Target Radio is offering low-cost sponsorship opportunities on Chicago's premier conservative talk radio station. Advertising on AM 560 WIND has worked for Safer USA. Let me show you how it can work for you. Call 815-744-5487. Join the On Target Radio team today at 815-744-5487.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
If you're listening and you don't like the intros, we're having a debate in the studio. We're all on. I kind of like the voice, the new voice. It reminds me of late night smooth jazz, and I'm okay with it. But I'm like the only person that says this. Everybody comes in the studio is going, dude, who is that guy? So drop us an email and tell us if you like it. Not that we can do anything about it for this little show that nobody cares about. But we'll voice the objection. Dr. Wallace mentioned something interesting over the break. We had a little discussion going here, and I would defer to you, Eric. Go ahead and this is your mic.
I just wanted to say I didn't want to think that I was laying all the blame on single mothers. I actually want to blame the fathers who are not involved in their kids' lives. I think studies have showed that when a father is involved in their children's lives, they're less likely to get involved in drugs, less likely to get involved in criminal activity, less likely to join gangs. So if fathers, even if when parents aren't living together, when they call up their kids, they get involved in their kids' lives, go to watch them in sports and things like that, it turns out that they're less likely to get involved in criminal activity. And if we had more of that, and I don't know what the statistics are, I know what they are in the black community, but I don't know what they are like in Hispanic community. I've got a magazine, Freedom's Journal magazine, and we talk about this all the time. It's a black conservative political magazine with a biblical worldview. And so we're always looking at the family and how best the family is kind of like the foundation of our society. And when we start messing with it and trying to either redefine it or act as though it doesn't really matter, we're playing around with stuff that's been around for centuries. So, and that's one of the things that I do talk about in my campaign. We talk about strong family values, and that's important.
I certainly agree with that. I have seen it. Everybody knows I worked as a part-time deputy, an auxiliary deputy for 18 years here in Illinois, and 2 in Ohio. And more often than not, people that we would encounter that were causing trouble typically came from homes where there was no father. And it is an issue, and I know it's probably politically incorrect to say that, but that is true.
I'm at the point where I'm not worried about being politically correct. I'm going to tell it as I think as I see it.
But you're the politician. So. I'm actually the one that can be obnoxious.
Well, people are going to decide whether they want to vote for me or not based on where I stand.
It's great to have a politician that's actually telling the truth and not just saying what they think people want to hear.
What are you trying to say, Tim?
You what? Well, what can you say? One of the things that has always struck me as the cities that have the highest crime rates are invariably those places that have the most draconian gun laws. And if you just look across the board, I don't know that there's an exception to that. Maybe there is, but I don't think there is. Are you aware of any, Don? I mean, is there any big city with big gun bans that have low crime rates?
No, and you know my theory on this whole thing is that they use the gun as a sideline, as a distraction from dealing with the real social problems that they have in their communities. And, it always comes back to that. What are you doing to solve the violence in my community? Well, I banned the guns. I banned the guns. I banned the guns. They're not talking about fixing the 50% dropout rate in the schools. They're not talking about, helping boost the family structure and stuff that goes on in the community. They're not talking about anything that helps people get jobs going into the future. The kids have something to look forward to, that they're going to grow up and they're going to be able to live that American dream, buy a home, raise a family, put their kids through college, give their kids something better than what they had. They're not doing that. They're just saying, we banned the guns. That's taking care of the problem. And it's not taking care of the problem. Obviously, it's not taking care of the problem.
Let me hold your feet to the fire, okay? So are you saying that if I go tomorrow into a place like Altgeld, all right, and I say, gather around, guys, put down the Glocks, put down the stuff, I got jobs for you, that's going to work?
I'm going to say that it's a very complicated issue, and a lot of things have to get fixed. And it's not going to be just fixing the schools, because if you fix the schools and there's no jobs for the people to move into when they get there, that's not going to work. You have to bring the jobs back. You have to bring the schools up to snuff. A lot of different things, a lot of moving pieces to this thing, and that's why they can't fix it in one political term, which is why they keep distracting you and saying it's the guns, it's the guns, it's the guns. The things that they have to do to fix what's going on in some of these communities in Chicago are going to take a long time to fix. It took a long time to degrade to where they're at. It's going to take a long time to get them fixed, and they're complicated issues. They're not something you can just flip a switch and it's fixed the next day. So it's easy for them to just keep going back to that well that they know works so well and say that it's the guns, it's the guns, it's the guns. And we need to call them out on that and tell them, we don't believe that you believe that. You're lying to us, and you need to tell us, what are you going to do to fix the real problems that are going on in these communities, and hold their feet to the fire, not mine.
You're listening to On Target Radio, AM 560, The Answer. So the question is, talking about youth and gun violence, what would be the first step? So we're sitting here, we're brilliant, we have all the answers, right? We can fix the problem. What actually, from a pragmatic perspective, would you do starting tomorrow that would start to make a dent?
Well, actually, I would. I think there's a spiritual aspect of this. I'm an ordained minister, and I believe that people can change, but there has to be a heart change. And sometimes if it's not coming through the family, maybe it comes through that extended family, which is part of the church. And if ministers would get together and actually not only preach the gospel, but actually starting living it out, we may begin to see a change there as well. He's also right about trying to do something about the schools. There is no silver bullet that's going to change this overnight. It took us some time to get here. We talk about the destruction of the falling apart of the family, falling apart of our moral structure and values and so forth. And that has to be rebuilt. And, before anybody's going to want to bring any jobs into the community, they want to know that there's a workforce there that's not going to be, stealing from them, or
it's qualified. It's qualified to do the work.
And it's qualified to do the work, right?
Sure.
So, you can do some stuff with school choice. I'm an advocate of school choice. We've seen how it works in Milwaukee and some other cities and states, how that improves education. We can do something, like I said, asking ministers to be involved and trying to reach out to some of these young people, doing something in the prisons. When those kids go to prison, I mean, you've got a captive audience there, trying to reach them and get them to see that they need to change their life, and how giving their life to the Lord will actually help change them in a way to make them more responsible and able to contribute to society.
Here's something to consider, David, is that we've changed the politician's viewpoint that the fear of not doing anything about crime is they've criminalized so many minor little issues and things that end up getting kids at a young age sent into the criminal justice system. And if they end up in an institution at a young age, their moral values and the things that they consider the norm is not the same as our outside society is. And you're right, they need to do something inside those institutions so when they come out, they're acclimated and they understand how normal society works, not how society works inside that institution. Because we're teaching these kids the wrong way to live their lives by locking them up and putting them in these places. And then we've got some kids, I think the first step that needs to be taken is you've got some people out there that are pretty bad actors, terrible people that have been brought up under those circumstances, and those people are never going to be normalized to our society.
But the problem is they affect the people around them.
They need to be removed from society, and that's a hard thing to do. But if we look at 75% of the people that perpetrated these crimes in the city of Chicago, that murdered people in 2011, were already involved in the criminal justice system, and 79% of the people who were murdered were already part of the criminal justice system. The people that are the hardest of the hardcore, they have to be removed from society. Otherwise, these kids don't have a chance. With them standing over the top of them, they don't have a chance.
It's like they're in school
to move forward.
It's like they're in school. We're taking your calls at 312-642-5600. It's On Target Radio. We're talking about youth and gun violence. In the next segment, we're going to have Tim's Fighting Back.
Yay!
Tim's Fighting Back will be coming up, and it appears as if Eric Zorn is not going to be able to make it this evening. We'll know in another probably minute or two, but if not, he'll be on next week, and that'll be fine. When we come back, there's a subject that I want to talk about, and I'll let you guys cogitate a little bit on this. The whole concept of violent video games and violent movies, but particularly video games. Every kid has video games now, and you get points for killing people. You actually rack up scores for killing people. So one of the things I want to talk about when we come back after Tim does his little piece is just, does that really have an effect or not? So that's, I think, what we're going to be talking about when we return with more On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer.
Attention firearm owners or those considering exercising your Second Amendment rights. I want to tell you about Illinois Gun Works. From void services and new firearm purchases to gunsmith services and an indoor shooting range, Don and his staff will assist you without attitude or pressure. Need training? Illinois Gun Works' popular Illinois Responsible Firearm Owners class teaches you the regulations to legally defend yourself, own, and transport your firearm. There's a required class for a Chicago firearm permit and popular new shooter familiarization class, including one for women. Now, I took this class and urge you to reserve your spot fast for this fun class. Illinois Gun Works offers a wide selection of training and certification classes, from security work to those just considering ownership, even special group classes. Illinois Gun Works, Chicagoland's full-service firearm headquarters, is located on Grand Avenue, just a block west of Harlem in Elmwood Park. Call 708-452-0040 or visit IllinoisGunWorks.com. That's 708-452-0040. Hi,
I'm David Lombardo, host of On Target Radio. You're living proof that radio advertising reaches listeners. In the 2 years I've been advertising on AM 560 WIND, Safer USA grew from 300 students a year to over 1,200. By coupling our On Target Radio broadcast with our Facebook page, we found our audience is steadily growing, and in only 2 months it appears we've exceeded 5,000 listeners. Over 34% are in the age group 25 to 34, 26% are 35 to 44. We have listeners from Rockford to Western Michigan and Southern Wisconsin to St. Louis. Thanks to live streaming on the internet, we also have listeners as far away as Germany, Japan, and New Zealand. On Target Radio is offering low-cost sponsorship opportunities on Chicago's premier conservative talk radio station. Advertising on AM 560 WIND has worked for Safer USA. Let me show you how it can work for you. Call 815-744-5487. Join the On Target Radio team today at 815-744-5487.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
We're back with more On Target Radio. Go to our Facebook page, On Target Radio, friend us, and ask a question. We'll answer it. And recommend us to your friends, please. We're talking this evening about youth and gun violence, and we have in the studio the Reverend Dr. Eric Wallace, who's running for Jesse Jackson's old 2nd congressional seat, and we have Don Moran, president of the ISRA. I wanted to bring up because we're talking about different components that go into the violence issue. One of my bones of contention is the video game thing. And I want you to think about that, because right after we do Tim's little thing, we're going to talk about that. And I think this is a bigger deal than people realize. Not Tim's thing, the video game thing.
This is the pinnacle of the show,
Tim,
I have you know.
Your thing is really the opposite. What is it, penultimate? I don't know. Go ahead.
This is Fighting Back, brought to you by the Illinois State Rifle Association. A home invasion suspect was arrested at a hospital after a mother shot him at her Montgomery County, Texas home. Mom said she was putting her 6-year-old son to bed when she heard a loud noise. She went running into the living room to let her dogs out and saw 3 masked men pointing a gun at her. She told them, "The TV's the most expensive thing I own. You could take that right through the front door," but they said they wanted money. She told them she kept money in her bedroom under the mattress, which was not true, but she wanted to get to where her gun was. The men followed her to the bedroom. She said she needed just a split second for them to take their eyes off her so she could grab her gun when her dogs ran in and started barking. When the men looked at the dogs, Mom grabbed the chance to fight back. She grabbed her gun and shot the first man right in the stomach. 2 of the men ran while she pointed a gun at a 3rd suspect, but before she could shoot the man, he attacked her, took the gun, but then he ran out the door. She grabbed her son, got another gun, called 911, and the mother said her story would have ended much differently if she didn't have her pistol. Mom said, "Protecting yourself goes into our Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, and thousands of people died to give me the right that saved my life." The sheriff's office later arrested the perpetrator at Memorial Hermann Hospital, where he was being treated for a gunshot wound. This has been Fighting Back, brought to you by the Illinois State Rifle Association.
And it underscores how stupid criminals really are.
The pinnacle of the show.
The pinnacle of the show. Pinnacle. Did you just learn that word?
You said it 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it means, but I think it's a good word.
No, it's always we always like having your little things on to show people that guns are not bad.
And I was so nice to you about your little rant there.
I'm still waiting.
And you're calling mine the little thing.
Little in terms of time, because I absorb huge amounts of time. We all know that. We're talking about youth and gun violence, and I would like to just address the issue of video games. Here's my premise. Society spends billions of dollars to advertise every year. We advertise on radio, television, even now in movies. When you go to the theater, you have to sit through like 5 minutes of advertising. Isn't the entire concept of advertising that it leaves a subliminal message and you buy the product? Isn't that the purpose of advertising? So you're exposed to the subject and it affects you. How can that be different on a violent video game?
I'm with you. I think everybody should buy Rocksmith and a guitar for their kid, and they should play that on their Xbox instead.
Well, I know it seems like
society would be a lot better off with a lot of guitar players running around.
Exactly. Almost any video game has, even the cartoons one, have somebody killing somebody.
Right.
I don't get that.
Yeah, but I have to jump in and say, what's the hard evidence? I mean, even before you had video games, you had kids running around playing cops and robbers and shooting each other, and I mean that's always been a part of our society from way back when. You always had the bad guys against the good guys, and you were always trying to kill the bad guys. So
I think to a certain degree, it's maybe it's the realism in the games today, and maybe it's the number of when you were a kid and you played cops and robbers with the neighbor kids. You didn't murder 150 people in the first 5 minutes when you were playing with them.
And you didn't get points for doing it.
In these games today, you do. It's
yeah, but I played the video games with shooting the zombies and the guys that pop up out of nowhere. And
do I have to be worried about you?
I'm just not. See, I'm also one of those who one of the things we talk about is individual liberty and fidelity, and it means that if we're gonna bring out laws about video games or gun laws and what have you, we need to have a compelling reason to do so, because any new law always infringes upon our right to exercise our liberty.
Yes, you're right. I get what you're saying. You're right.
Well, I would agree with that.
And I want some compelling reason to show that, if you spend X number of hours playing this violent video game, you're more likely to go out and do something violent. And I'm not sure we have that. I'm open. If it's there, then we can have a discussion about it.
Actually, I don't know that there's ever been a study on that. I don't know.
Because we've always been, even with little water pistols, we run around shooting each other with stuff. I mean,
well, I certainly played Army when I was a kid. It's true.
I had little Army men and stuff.
But it was, I don't know. It just seemed back then it wasn't realistic. Some of these games, like Call of Duty, is like, wow. I mean, I watch people play that game, and it's real looking. I mean, you're shooting an M4. I mean, it's pretty real.
Right.
I don't know. That's my little rant. But anyway, we are going to be back with more On Target Radio on youth and gun violence. We'll be back in segment 4, and we'll solve all the problems of the world, right? Here we go.
You can hear Gun Rights Radio Network on Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher allows you to listen to your favorite shows directly from your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, or Palm phones, on demand and on the go. Don't have Stitcher? Download it for free today at Stitcher.com or in the app stores. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.
For 35 years, Pelcher's Shooter's Supply has served the Lansing area. Pelcher's offers new and used firearms sales, appraisals, and gunsmithing service. Pelcher's new spacious showroom has hundreds of major brand firearms and supplies, and PelcherGuns.com features daily specials. Pelcher's Shooter's Supply, on the corner of Ridge Road and Henry Street in downtown Lansing. Online at PelcherGuns.com or call 708-474-0662.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
It occurs to me, Tim, that we ought to sell tickets just to be in the studio when we do this show.
We could have 2 separate shows. Well, you could pay like $5 or something to watch the intermission.
We really could. It's just worth being in here and see how bad it actually goes.
Ring
off
the bell.
The air. Yeah. We were talking about youth and gun violence, and we were talking over the break when people weren't watching some show on television. But we were talking about Chicago specifically and Rahm Emanuel and the Fast and Furious thing. Rahm Emanuel was advisor to the president during that period of time. Don, you had a thought about that.
Well, I received an email from somebody earlier this week, and I'm not going to say that there's any credence to it, but I'm not going to say there's not either. It gives us food for thought. Is that Rahm Emanuel, as chief of staff to President Obama, was the person who was advising him during this Fast and Furious action, that so-called undercover operation that took place in the southwest United States, where the BATFE worked with dealers to supply guns, semi-automatic firearms to Mexican drug cartels. Some evidence has been shown that this was done in an effort to drive up a link between American firearms and the Mexican drug cartels in order to push an anti-gun gun control agenda. When Rahm Emanuel came to the city of Chicago, his former police superintendent, Weiss, had lowered the murder rate in Chicago to the lowest it had been in 24 years. First thing he did when he came into office is he told him he wasn't going to renew that fellow's contract, fired him, and hired McCarthy from New York. McCarthy from New York comes in, and all of a sudden the murder rate is zooming in Chicago. And, it's hard for me to believe that someone could be this heartless, but the email questioned whether or not Rahm might be doing this, running up these numbers in order to drive this anti-gun agenda. And it's food for thought. It's something to think about.
Long ago, I gave up any semblance of thought that there was honor among politicians, particularly in this administration. But not for a moment would I suggest that Republican administrations are measurably better. I tend to agree with them more, but politicians, present company accepted, of course.
Thank you.
Politicians tend to be slimy. I really think they are. And I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, realistically, the whole thing about Obama all during his running for the presidency the first time, the second time, his kids were always involved. His kids were in everything. When they were doing health care, his kids were involved. And he takes a whole bunch of kids and put them on a stage and wants us to believe that they wrote these letters to him. And then when the NRA makes one comment about it's okay for the president to have guards for his kid's school, oh, that's completely, that's wrong. They load the deck. Saul Alinsky is with us alive and well. I mean, you're a Chicagoan, you know about that, right?
Yeah, and of course it was Rahm who said, to never let a serious crisis go to waste.
Exactly.
And so both Rahm as the mayor of Chicago and the president are using this, these, terrible incidents that have happened. And our hearts goes out to the families that have lost their loved ones. But, to act as though having new gun control laws is somehow going to change that is ludicrous. They know better, and for them to be jerking people around by their emotions is just wrong.
And you're right, they do know better. It's like the definition of an assault weapon, which just absolutely makes me scream. First of all, the very term assault weapon is a made-up term. It doesn't exist. It's not a military term. And when you go to define it, I mean, Don, the list is ridiculous.
It is.
It's cosmetic stuff. Has nothing to do with lethality at all.
Right.
And yet that's what we have to live with. And like Saul Alinsky in the book, Rules for Radicals, if you say it often enough and loud enough, it becomes truth. And there are people walking around now, a lot of people, who think that these firearms are somehow military weapons. And it's just not the truth.
And somehow if we make a new law, the criminals are going to follow.
Exactly.
They're only going to see that they can't have this. They can't have this weapon.
Gun-free zone.
Right.
Don't bring it here. All the good guys won't take their gun there, but the bad guys, for some reason, can't read.
Yeah. Tens of thousands of gun control laws are on the books today, and it's already against the law to murder someone. And we're going to create a new law that's going to magically change the day.
Yeah. They'll all of a sudden start obeying the law.
Right.
City of Chicago, Springfield, enforce the laws that are already on the books. Don't put the laws on the good guys. Only the good guys follow the laws. The bad guys are not following the laws you already have. Think about that.
Amen to that.
I don't know, and I don't know that there's an easy fix to it. I will say that that Republicans, and I am one, but I will say that Republicans are dramatically bad about getting out the message. We get beaten down all the time by the liberal anti-gun guys, and it gets to be very frustrating after a while.
Well, you have to arm the good guys. What is it? LaPierre says that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is to have a good guy with a gun.
That happened in Atlanta last week.
It did. I tell people all the time, you should read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. First of all, it's actually a good book. And while there is some liberalism in it, it's actually a very well-written book. And it's the Bible of the anti-gun people. They literally are following that book. And we need to be doing the same thing. We will come back, and we're going to kind of wrap up youth and gun violence. Our guest this evening is the Reverend Dr. Eric Wallace, who's running for Jesse Jackson's 2nd congressional seat. Do I get that in enough, Eric?
Yes, you do. But it actually, this time you said was his seat. It's not his seat. It's the people's seat.
Thank you. Thank you. I stand corrected on that. And
he
Don
just
Moran,
occupied it for a minute.
That's right. And Don Moran, president of the Illinois State Rifle Association, will come back. We'll do a little more shameless proselytizing of Eric's campaign. We certainly support him. And Don, you can stick a plug in for the ISRA when we return after these messages with more On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer. I'm David Lombardo, president of Safer USA, Chicagoland's most popular firearm training school. We continue to offer our popular home protection and concealed carry seminar every month. This 8-hour seminar covers everything you need to know to safely and legally use a firearm for both concealed carry and home invasion, and qualifies you for Florida and Utah concealed carry permits good in about 30 states. Be sure to call and ask how we can help you raise funds for your organization or provide a guest speaker. We're also offering the NRA Basic Pistol Course and our Tactical Pistol 1 and 2. As always, I offer private one-on-one instruction for Basic Pistol, Chicago Firearm Certification, and Basic Home Defense. For further information, please call 877-954-3030 or go to saferusa.com. Safer USA. Choosing to own a firearm is your business. Teaching you to own it responsibly is ours.
That's 877-954-3030 or SAFERUSA.com.
You're listening to On Target Radio on AM 560, The Answer, with David Lombardo. Here's David with more interesting conversation on firearms, safety, your Second Amendment rights, and much more.
Well, we're back with more On Target Radio, and now, with 4 minutes and 50 seconds left of the show, people are calling in, and that is because the game is over.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a Facebook question. Robin says, how does Dr. Wallace feel about armed guards in Chicago schools? Eric, you have 1.6 seconds to answer this question.
I'll make it easy. I'll say yes, I'm for it. I wouldn't even I wouldn't have a problem with teachers being armed if they were qualified and they went through the skills and you knew that they were able to handle a firearm. Sure, why not? They have them in other states.
And in point of fact, it was Bill Clinton that introduced this concept, and we still have armed guards, law enforcement guards in schools to this day from back then.
But when a Democrat said it was a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a phone call. We got callers. This is insanity. John, you have something you'd like to say?
Sure. The thing about the assault weapon being the definition of our guns now comes from the media not doing their job as the First Amendment. They're supposed to be watchdogging the government, not getting in bed with them. So,
John, did you hear my rant last week about the Fourth Estate?
Well, I guess I didn't.
Oh, well, you have to look at last week's newsletter because we talk about that very subject. John, thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good one. Okay, so what we want to do is give Dr. Wallace the opportunity to tell us a little bit about his campaign. You got about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, as you heard, I'm running for the 2nd Congressional District, and the theme of our campaign is actually Rise for a New Beginning. If you think the 2nd Congressional District, it's time for something new. And
yes.
RISE is actually an acronym for Responsible Government, Individual Liberty and Fidelity, Strong Family Values, and E for Economic Empowerment. And we think if we have these, it's a new way of talking about conservative principles to try and articulate them better so that people can understand and then engage in a dialogue. And so if people are interested, they can actually download a copy of the RISE principles on WallaceForIllinois.com. That's WallaceForIllinois.com.
Okay, and we certainly support you. We'll have you back on again.
Appreciate
it. You're a delightful guest to have on our show.
Thank you.
Don. ISRA. I think you got a minute.
www.isra.org. www.isra.org. Go there, get signed up for iGold. March 6th is our Gun Owners Lobby Day, Illinois Gun Owners Lobby Day. The last couple of years, we've had about 7,000 people show up. We meet at the Prairie Capitol Convention Center in the morning. We march from there to the Capitol building, up to the steps in front of the Lincoln steps in front of the governor's office. Wall to wall, sidewalk to sidewalk, building to building, people as far as the governor can see. And I'd love to have 25,000 people show up there this year. Figure out a way to get there. Go to our website. You can buy a bus ticket, and we can get you to Springfield and get you home. But be there. Take the day off of work. It's a Wednesday. We know it's the middle of the week. People hate doing that, but that's the only day we can be assured the legislature will be there.
We will keep plugging it on this show.
And so many people think, hey, there were 7,000 people there. Why do I need to go? You can't think that way. That's Everybody right. needs to go.
We need more gold hats.
That's right. More gold hats. Gold shirts.
It's never, ever been more important that people show up on the doorstep of the legislature and tell them how they feel.
And we'll do it. We'd like to thank our guest this evening, the Reverend Dr. Eric Wallace. We'd like to thank Don Moran. Tim Montague for our technical consultant. T1 was also our call screener. We'd like to thank George Hoffman on the board and all of our sponsors, Illinois Gunworks, Pelcher Shooter Supply, Illinois State Rifle Association, our website developer 31 Moons, and Safer USA. Next week, we're going to be talking about what's going on with the gun stores. That's going to be an interesting topic. But until then, friend us on Target Radio on Facebook, and thanks for listening. Tim, say good night.
Good night.
Good night. We hope you'll be back next Sunday at 9 p.m. for more On Target Radio. And thanks, Mike, for making it all possible.
Thank you, Mike.